Good morning. This is Cynthia A. Johnson with Stand Up Now. Thank you for tuning in to this show. I hope you find this half hour enjoyable and inspiring as we showcase regular people from the city of Detroit who are doing great things and really making a difference in our city, the city of Detroit. Good morning, family. Good morning. This is Stand Up Now with Cynthia A. Johnson, and you're listening to us on Gospel 1440 WMKM. First of all, thank you so much for joining this show. I also want to let you know that any comments that are made on 1440 WMKM on Stand Up Now show is that of the host and or the guest. So with that, just want to let you know, and I'm so excited about this, that we are having one of the best on Channel 2, Fox 2 News, M.L. Elrick, who is my special guest today. And he's not going to be in the studio, unfortunately, but he is supposed to be calling in. And I need to check with my engineer. We are going to be talking about a little bit of politics, things that are going on in the city of Detroit. I'll even ask him briefly, not a whole lot, but I'll ask him if he thinks that the time that Mr. Kwame Kilpatrick, if the time he received in prison was too much time. And do not hesitate to give us a call at 313-871-6094 or 313-871-6095. And I'm going to ask our engineer to put on In the Midst of It All. And while we're in the midst of it all, I'm going to try and see if I can get in contact with Mr. Elrick. All right. I think Mr. Elrick will be calling any moment now. I looked down at my phone and there was a number that I didn't recognize, and I said, let me call that number. And he called my private number. But I'm sure that he is on the line now. Good morning, ML.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Good. Beautiful day here.
It is a gorgeous day. So we only have less than a half hour. So let's just get right to it. I know that you are an Emmy Award winner. You're a Pulitzer, and you are an investigator for Fox 2 News. And your whole premise, a lot of the premise that I see anyway, is to investigate and make things better for those of us who live in the city of Detroit. And you investigate on politicians who are not doing the right thing by the people. Do I kind of have it right?
That's pretty well put. Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm what we call a watchdog reporter, and my job is to hold public officials accountable. They're paid with our tax dollars. When they run for office or when they take their jobs, they say they want to help the people. And if I find out they're not, we try and document that, show it to Detroiters and people elsewhere, and see what they think about it. If they want to keep electing them, that's up to them. But at least at least we let people know what's going on, and so they can be informed and get a fuller picture than they get from the politicians themselves. They spend an awful lot of money telling us about only the good things, which sometimes turn out not even to be true.
That's right. I know that for a fact, that some of the things that these politicians tell us are not true. And the word politician, it has such a negative connotation with it. But I just want to let people know, and I want to know what you think about this, ML. The word politician is not a bad word. It's just how people use those positions.
Right, and I'm no linguist, but my understanding is that politics is from the Greek meaning for the people, and that's what politicians are supposed to be. They're supposed to be for the people, and far too often we find out that there's quite a few of them who are for one person, themselves, or maybe themselves and a few people from their family or their group of friends, which is, to me, if you're a politician, your family gets served last. Ours gets served first. I
agree. Absolutely. So, ML, you're a Detroiter.
I am. East English Village. I'm on the east side.
See, that's what, and I wanted to make sure that our family, the listening audience, know who we're talking to. ML Elrick is a Detroiter. He's an investigative reporter, but he also has a right to make comments with regard to what's going on in the city of Detroit. And I think you do a hell of a job.
Well, you're too kind.
I really do. Now, you were the investigator reporter when you were over at the Detroit Free Press, or was that the News, with regard to Kwame Kilpatrick?
Yes, I covered Mr. Kilpatrick when he ran for mayor back in 2001, and we became pretty friendly. I know people have trouble believing that now, but we were very friendly. He tried to hire me for about a year and a half, and then when he didn't like the stories we were doing, things got a little more tense. But I went from covering him in City Hall to uncovering him as an investigative reporter.
You were not being bought. That's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like he was trying to hire you, and you just weren't having it. So that's a good thing. But here's my question to you, ML. Do you think that Mr. Kilpatrick got too much time, those 28 years?
That's a tricky thing. One reason he got so much time is because he was a public official. If he had been a private individual, I don't believe he would have gotten such a long sentence. But when you betray the public trust, that's a special kind of crime all on its own, because not only have you taken from us, you've deprived us from the good things that you were supposed to do, that you told us you would do, but you also create cynicism. And I think probably one of the hardest things to be, it's very hard to be a young black man in this city anyways, but to be a young black man in this city running for office, you now have to answer for Kwame Kilpatrick, and that's not fair. And so I think there should be a harsh punishment for public officials who betray us. To me, that's the greatest crime. The stealing the money, well, we'll get more money. It's not easy, but we can always get more money. But when you turn our hearts against people just because of what you did, that's a pretty serious crime. 28 years is comparable with the sentence that was handed down around the same time in Cuyahoga County, which is the county where Cleveland is, to one of the white county officials who had also been involved in a racketeering situation. So that sentence isn't inconsistent, while it is almost historic in its length. But I guess here's my short answer to your question, even though I've talked a lot. If the purpose of punishment is to rehabilitate people and to make them see the error of their ways, I don't think 28 years is enough, because Mr. Kilpatrick is never going to recognize that what he did was wrong. You're going to have to keep him in there forever, which isn't reasonable. So, I'll let the courts figure out what's right and wrong on those matters. But when you cheat people, particularly people who are struggling, man, that's about as low as you can go.
I absolutely agree. Now I'm going to switch over to what's going on in the city of Detroit under this current mayor, who, for all accounts, did not live in the city of Detroit. Also, what we have found, when I say we, I'm talking about people like Tom Barrow and the people who worked with him, including moi, we found that absentee ballots were over and again used, ballots that were written in by what appeared to be the same signature. Not once, not twice, but for one ballot. What do you say about that? Those two things that I'm asking you about. Isn't that a part of dishonesty?
Well, there's no question that Mike Duggan lived outside of Detroit for most of his adult life, and that I think most people think of him as a resident of Livonia more so than a resident of Detroit. But he did live in the city, I believe in Palmer Woods or Rosedale Park, for the statutory required period before he ran for mayor. He did live in Detroit before he ran for mayor, and I think he's okay there. As to now, of course, he lives in the Manoogian now, so I do kind of feel a little bit like Dave Bing moving to the city for a minute, then becoming mayor. And I think the real test of Mike Duggan will be where he lives after he's no longer mayor. For all I know, Dave Bing is back in Franklin. We know that Mayor Kilpatrick is in El Reno, Oklahoma, not by choice. Ken Cockrell, former mayor, I believe still lives in Woodbridge.
Yeah, he does.
Which is in Midtown.
Right.
And Dennis Archer, of course, still lives on the east side. So it'll be interesting to see where Mr. Duggan goes when he's served his terms, if he has multiple terms. But the ballot issue you raise is an interesting one. I've heard a lot about absentee ballot fraud over the years. At one time, when Jackie Courier was clerk and Gil Hill and Kwame Kilpatrick were running for mayor, there were people who worked in the clerk's office who also paid as consultants to the mayoral campaigns to help them acquire absentee ballots. I've heard a lot of allegations about people going into senior citizens' homes and helping the seniors. When I say helping, I put a little emphasis on that because the help could be viewed as fraud in some cases, fill out their ballots. I personally have no firsthand knowledge of that, and I haven't examined the things that you and my friend Tom Barrow have looked at. So I would be interested in seeing those things. I can't speak to that, but certainly there's been a lot of talk about ballots being
misused.
We say assisted with, kind.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate your honesty, ML.
Investigated.
And what you know is what you know, and what you don't know, and I'm hopeful we'll check it out.
If anybody knows someone who's been helping fill out ballots improperly or has a loved one who felt that they were coerced into filling out a ballot in a way that they didn't feel was appropriate, I invite them to contact me at Fox 2, and my number is 248-552-5261. And my email is ml.elrick, E-L-R-I-C-K, at foxtv.com. If you want to share those on your website, or if anybody wants to follow me on Facebook or Twitter, I have that contact information. If we get some credible leads, we will devote some time and resources to getting to the bottom of that, because the taking of votes is one of the most heinous crimes that can be committed in a democracy, and we can't let that happen.
What about people who claim to live in one district and they really don't live in the district? I won't go there. We have a caller. Someone's on the line who wants to speak with you, ML. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Cynthia.
Good morning.
This is Garland Hardiman.
Good morning, Mr. Hardiman.
Good morning to you, and good morning, ML Elrick. I happen to have met you during the Kwame Kilpatrick trial down at the Federal Building, and I just want to applaud you for your work. You're doing a yeoman's work in terms of exposing the activities that are inappropriate and illegal among some of our elected officials, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. My question is this. We have an elected official in our House Representative District by the name of Fred Durhal III. And I don't think we have the three strikes law. I'm familiar with that, having spent some time in California a number of years doing different things, mainly in law enforcement there. But in Michigan, I don't think they have three strikes, but this is a person who I think is a candidate for three strikes. He didn't expose the fact when he ran for office that he had a felony conviction for possession for sales of narcotics. Then when he ran for office, he used a different address than where he actually legally resided. On his driver's license currently, he has two different names. He has Fred Dorhall Jr., and he signs his license Fred Dorhall III. I think having had, some experience in politics, that when you use an affidavit or different names on the same legal document, that's false representation, and you could be guilty of a second felony. And then the third is recently he has used intimidation and coercion with a lick spittle, I call them, but another community leader, saying that if they don't do the things that they want, that he will not give them support for appropriations for a community center. So I'd just like to know your feelings on activities like that are engaged in by elected officials like Fred Dorhall III, and will you investigate those things to find out if the allegations are true? And I'd be happy to write something on your webpage or your Facebook page reiterating what I just said.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for the kind words, Mr. Hardman. I'm glad you cleared up when you said you did some time in California. I wasn't sure where you were going with that. But
Not did time, but I lived in California for a number of years.
All right. I'm glad we got that straight.
Okay.
Yes, if you'd like to send me some of this as a private message on Facebook, that'd probably be better. I don't want the lazy reporters in town trolling for that stuff. But I will say this about residency. I think anyone who's seen some of the stories we did on Brian Banks and John Alumba know that we have looked into representatives and lawmakers who claim to live in their district and who actually do not, or who may have left their district a little early to try and get a head start on another race. Those are important stories because we have a representative government, and while a lot of people feel that these districts have been rigged so that they favor certain parties and certain politicians, we should at least be confident that the person who represents us lives among us, so that they know that when the lights are off, that they're off for them too, that when police response times are slow, that they're slow to their neighborhood, that there's a lot of garbage and a lot of tall grass, that they have to see that, and that hopefully will motivate them to do something about it too. So we do investigate these matters, and we have spent some time looking into various members of our State House delegation, because this is a rampant allegation that people try and find districts that they think might be winnable, and then they run from those districts using a false address. We've had some candidates who ultimately weren't elected, which is why we didn't put the stories on the air, but the addresses they used turned out to be abandoned homes. And that's reprehensible to me. You cannot come into office with a lie on your lips. That is not the way to start a relationship with anybody, let alone
that's right,
people of Detroit or the people of Michigan. So if we can prove those things, we will put those people on TV, because we think that you deserve to be represented by your neighbors. That's what the Constitution is based on. That's what common sense calls for. And that's a pledge that they make. And politicians that lie, well, nobody lies about just one thing. So we'll catch.
Well, thank you for that response.
I really
about the rest.
About the mayor. The mayor sold his home in Palmer Woods as soon as he was elected, so he's not a property owner in the city of Detroit. He was asked about adding homeowners insurance to all the district meetings that he's had, as well as the D-auto insurance. He said maybe at a later time. Let's get through this first. What's your feeling about that? Because in most cases, if you're a homeowner, you could have a discount if you have homeowners insurance as well as auto insurance, and you're a homeowner in the city of Detroit. But the mayor chose to only do one rather than both at the same time. What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, I'm going to say I don't know enough to give a really informed opinion, but you seized on exactly the point that I was going to make, which is most people get a discount by having multiple policies with the same insurer. And so if he really wants to lower rates for Detroiters, I think they're going to have to bring homeowners into that at some point. Now, on the other hand, I know you don't eat an elephant with one swallow, so maybe he's taking good-sized bites at this, but manageable bites. And so I would probably wait and see what happens with that before rendering some kind of judgment. And what is my opinion? I'm just a reporter, so I wouldn't just, for what I can prove, that I put my name on. But in terms of, I'm glad you mentioned about the selling the house right after he became mayor, because I looked into that and I considered doing a story about that. And what I did was I looked back at our other mayors. Kwame Kilpatrick sold his house shortly after becoming mayor. Dennis Archer sold his place shortly after becoming mayor. I think all the mayors, Coleman Young did not own a home in Detroit while he was mayor. I think all the mayors going back to Roman Gribbs in 1972, and even before that, sold their homes after becoming mayor or did not own a residence in the city after they moved into the Manugian mansion. The one exception to that would probably be Ken Cockrell Jr., who the voters did not elect mayor and did not return to office for whatever reason. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad decision, but there is a pattern here of mayors saying, if I'm going to live in the Manugian mansion, I'm not going to own another place in Detroit. So,
you know what, ML,
what
but
bothers me, it seems to be the way things go. So it's kind of tough to get too excited about it. Although at one time I was like, oh boy, this pisses me off. But
that's a little bit different, ML and Garland, Mr. Hardiman, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I didn't know that the Mr. Mike Duggan had sold the property that he had bought in order to become mayor. I didn't know that he sold that property, and I think that that's a little bit different than all the other examples, ML, that you gave. And the reason I think that it's different is because he came from Livonia. He did not start off or live originally in Detroit. So after he became mayor, he sold the home that he needed to live in the city of Detroit, and then moved into the Manugian mansion. To me, that would have been a story, but that's just me.
Well, the one mayor he's not different from is Dave Bing, because Dave Bing lived in Franklin, I believe still owns the home in Franklin. He was renting a place in Detroit before he moved into the Manugian, so he never owned a place in Detroit. So Bing and Duggan are not that different. It is, and I believe Duggan, as a young man, maybe as a boy, lived in Detroit. But to your point, as a Detroiter, I think it's really hard to completely understand and to be invested and be passionate about what's happening in this city if you haven't experienced it yourself on a long-term basis. Now, that isn't to say that a talented individual cannot improve the quality of life in this city. And whatever you think of the mayor of Detroit, whoever it is, you got to want them to succeed, because if they fail, we all go down with them. I mean, Kwame Kilpatrick put the city in bankruptcy, and we're all suffering because of it, whether you like them or not. But it is, to me, what bothers me is that there wasn't somebody who's lived in Detroit their whole life who put together a strong and credible race to be mayor, and that the best we could do is come up with someone who's kind of late to the party. But you know what? I wish Mayor Duggan well, because to do otherwise would be to cut off my nose to spite my face, and I don't have the greatest nose, but I need it.
And I hear you, and I absolutely agree that I am a Detroiter, a lifelong Detroiter, one who I want to see the best for our city. But in seeing the best for our city, I want honest people who are about the people. See, I could easily say that because Fred Durhal III is in office, I want to give him my 100% support. It's very hard for me to do that when I know he came into office with a lie. So I understand where you're coming from, ML, but I want to, like I said, I want to see Detroit do well. And we are going to do well. The problem is, though, is that I'm seeing two different Detroits, one which is downtown and the other side of the track. I happen to live on the other side of the tracks.
Yeah, I think most of Detroit is on the other side of the tracks, and I'm glad to see downtown invigorated. I'm glad that it's a place where people can go and enjoy themselves and feel relatively safe. But if all we do is create an all-inclusive resort in the middle of Detroit, Michigan, I mean, I've never been to Mexico, but I know people who go to those places and they say it's great. Just don't go outside the fence. Well, we can't have that. There's more outside the fence than there is inside the fence.
That's right.
And I appreciate it's got to start somewhere. And if downtown is where the revival happens and it spreads out, well, then I'm all for it. But if all we're thinking about is downtown and we're forgetting about around town, then we're going to fail. We're going to fail horribly, and no one's going to save us.
Absolutely. Mr. Hardiman, are you still with us?
I am. And I enjoyed the conversation between you and ML. I think you're offering some important information to the residents of Detroit and people in the surrounding communities. I believe that Detroit is going to grow, but I think ML has a very tough job to do in making people accountable. And I like for him to continue to do that.
Yes.
And zero in on some of these things that we talked about today in terms of these elected officials who are bamboozling the public about what they're really supposed to do. I didn't hear you guys talk about Senator Smith, but he's our senator, and he basically is back up in Lansing, Michigan, voting on measures while he's facing 7 felony charges. And I'd like to know ML Elrick's position on that and whether or not he thinks that he should resign so that we can move forward. And I know there won't be another election. They won't have a special election until there's a regular election next year.
We have less than 30 seconds. I want to say before ML makes a comment, if he can, I want to thank you so much, ML. I really appreciate you being with us today. I really do. We have less than 7 seconds, so there's nothing else you can say. I just want to thank both of you for being my guests. This is Stand Up Now with Cynthia A. Johnson.
If all we're thinking about is downtown and we're forgetting about around town,